Okay, so now you've created your profile, you've texted some girls, you're getting responses. That's excellent. Most of the hardest work is done now, at least as far as online dating. But what I'm going to teach you now is how to respond to all those future texts that you're going to get, not just online, but also in phone and text games. This will help you with meeting girls in real life as well. Okay, so the secret here is we're not going to deal with every single text individually because there's an infinite number of texts that you could receive. What we're going to do instead is we're going to categorize the texts, because while there are an infinite number of texts you can receive, there are only 4 categories of texts you can receive, and I've figured out what they are. First category is silence. Either she's never responded to you, you're sending stuff and she's not responding, or you've been conversing back and forth and all of a sudden she goes silent. So that's silence. Next is a shit test, or we call it a congruence test. Basically what it is, it's a girl giving you a hard time to sort of test you as a man, to try and find out if you're as cool as you're conveying you are, to try and find out if you really are like an abundant guy or if you'll become needy and like wussy and that sort of stuff. Okay, so that's the shit test, which we'll talk about in more depth when we actually get to that particular topic. The next is logical conversation, or just like asking you questions. So things like, how was your weekend? That would be an example. Or if she just says, yeah, XYZ thing happened to me today, and just tells like some kind of story, but doesn't really say like, I like you, I don't like you. There's nothing really emotionally relevant going on, but she is sharing details of her life or asking you for details of yours. So it's a very like sort of like non-emotional baseline type conversation, but she is sharing, she is exchanging information. And then the last is something that we call the overtly positive, the very positive. Oh my God, you're so funny. Yeah, that sounds great. You're so cute, that kind of stuff, right? So when you're starting to get positives, that's good. Also understand that when we do the logical in the questions can sort of shade towards positive. The very fact that she's asking you questions is sort of a positive indicator as well. So those kind of bleed into each other. And interestingly enough, the categories will bleed into each other. So sometimes you will have a text that's maybe 2 categories. Like you might have a text that's maybe shit test and then a logical question. Or a lot of times you have logical question and some positive. So it is a bit of a gradient, but all texts you're going to receive will fit into one of these 4 categories, or 2 at most. And almost always, if it's 2 categories, it'll be 2 categories that are next to each other, okay? So we'll look at this as silence being the worst, shit test being the next worst, logical conversation being better, and then a positive being the best. So you're going sort of through this gradient where you're trying to move it from one step to the next. And if you respond to the format of text in the right way, you generally will move things forward. So first, let's talk about silence. Well, for silence, basically, what I want you to do is what I call pinging value into the void. We talked earlier about the idea of giving value, offering value. That's when you're conveying your personality, and this is key, not asking for anything from her. If you're asking for things from her, you're asking for value. You're asking for her to give to you. Instead, what you need to do is be fun and interesting, funny, creative, convey your personality, and don't ask for anything in return. So for example, if you say like, let's go grab a drink at this place at this time, you're asking her to make plans to impose on herself for you. But if you say something like, oh, the funniest thing just happened, you wouldn't believe it, and then like some quick anecdote, that would be too long for a text message. That would be like a conversational thing. But here you're offering value and you're not asking for anything in return, right? An example of these value offering texts would be something that you'd put up as a Facebook post or like a tweet, right? Something short, to the point, fun, interesting, sharing it with the world. And if someone wants to respond to it, they certainly could, but it doesn't require a response. And if you send it out there and don't get a response, there's nothing precluding you sending another one, because all you did was offer value. You didn't ask for something. If you ask for something like, hey, let's get together at this day. And like, hey, let's get together this day. Hey, can you do this for me? Hey, can you do this for me? You look more and more needy, and you seem like this like icky person that's always asking people for things instead of providing things of your own. So you go down a very negative route when you're trying to ask for value instead of offering value, okay? So what you're doing here, pinging value into the void, think Facebook status or tweet. Just putting it out there, pinging it, and then what you're looking for is the girl to sort of like pop back into talking with you. And you can continue to send these over and over again. I wouldn't send them like every single hour, or even like necessarily like every single day, but you can keep pinging them as long as you don't get a negative response. In particular, in text and phone game, you can keep pinging them for a really long time. I've had girls that I've like had on the go for like 3 months, 6 months, and eventually like maybe they had a boyfriend, and then all of a sudden they don't have a boyfriend, they come out on a date, and I was just pinging value the whole time, and all of a sudden they pop and come out. So that can definitely happen. Next is the shit test, or the congruence test. So what they're doing here is they're checking to see if you're as cool as you're conveying. It's very easy to say cool things. It's much harder to say something cool under pressure. So a really good way for a girl to assess a guy is to put him under pressure and see how he responds. So what shit tests basically are is they are attempts to put you in an unfavorable frame. For example, a shit test might be something like, is that your pickup line? Or you consider that a good message? Things like that, where they're putting you in this frame of needy, try-hard guy who's maybe not so good with girls, that kind of stuff. That's one example. Another, they could also do like sort of like playerish ones, be like, oh, I bet you say this to all the girls, or I bet you have a different girl every night. So these are different frames, right? Different ways of looking at the situation that are unfavorable to you. And what you need to do to pass shit tests is, there's two ways. One is misinterpret, meaning treat it like it's a compliment. So if you say, I bet you have a different girl home every night, you'd be like, wow, that's really flattering that you think I'm that smooth. I'm actually, much more innocent than that, but I appreciate that. Thank you, right? So you rephrase it, treat it like it's a compliment. The other is like agree and exaggerate. Then she's like, yeah, but you have a different girl home every night. Be like, every night, seriously? Like, it's like every hour. I mean, honestly, like I can't, like my penis hates me at this point, right? You could do that. That's agreeing and exaggerating, taking it to like the level where you've taken that logical frame so far it's become illogical. So those are ways to pass those shit tests, those compliance tests. The other key thing when passing them is do not add extra stuff. Just pass it and trust that it's good enough. For example, if you pass the test and then you add it in, you say this like witty response that says, I don't give a fuck, I can handle my shit, whatever, and then you throw in, so you want to hang out later? It totally ruins the impact of what you just did, okay? So when you're throwing these shit tests, just pass them. Don't ask a logical question. Don't try and escalate. Just pass the shit test and trust that she likes you enough to proceed forward. Understand that if the girl's responding at all, it's a positive, okay? A shit test is actually a compliment. It's her way of saying, I like you enough to find out about us. If she didn't like you, she would give you silence instead. So the very fact that she's responding to you, understand that it's a positive. Next category is the logical question, which again is even more positive. So she's engaging with you, but she's engaging with you without any negativity, and usually in a way that's either sharing something of her life or she's asking you about your life. So this is where she's genuinely interested and wants to get to know you. The problem with these logical statements is that most guys answer them in really boring ways that really just kill the interaction. They get caught up in answering these logical questions, interviewing the girl, getting interviewed, and all the emotional content goes away. It just becomes this like exchange of facts. So the key thing to do in these situations is one of a few different things. If the overall interaction's been not so great so far and you're getting these sort of logical questions, what I would do is deal with the logical question briefly and then ping value into the void. Just ping some value, make the interaction like better, offer something to the conversation. If the conversations have been pretty good, what I would do is answer the logical question very quickly again, and then start to move things forward, start to escalate so you don't get caught in this logical purgatory of getting interviewed forever and ever. You start moving the set forward. You don't want to be in stagnant interactions. And when we talk about the close, that's what you're going to do when you start getting the overt positive. When a girl's being positive, don't keep talking to her on text or online over and over again. Get her on the date. Right? If you're online, get the phone number. If you're on the phone, get her on the date. Don't waste time. Your window of opportunity with a lot of girls, especially girls online, but girls in general, is very small. If they're single and looking, there's a lot of guys also looking, and if you dilly-dally around, it's very likely some other guy's going to hook up with them first, and you'll miss your window. So strike while the iron is hot. Also, if you have the opportunity to escalate and aren't escalating, you're sort of conveying to her that you don't understand the dance of seduction. You don't understand how men and women are supposed to interact, and it makes you look socially stupid. And so you actually lose value from not taking that opportunity when it's presented. All right? However, when we talk about closing, we want to do a soft close, which is we're going to talk about in the next module. So wait for that, but understand that when you are getting positives, it is now time to close. One other side tangent I want to give you is the tangent of what we call invisible threads. Now, this is a great topic for online dating. And what an invisible thread is basically is once you say a particular thing, there's only so many likely responses you're going to get for that statement. So since you're sending kind of similar or the same messages over and over again, you're very likely to get similar or the same responses. And the great thing about this is once you've solved the response once, you don't have to solve it over and over again. So be looking for these opportunities. And that's actually another reason why copy and paste texting is great, because once you send out a text to like 20 different girls, you get the responses, handle them. Well, you send it to 100 girls, you're just going to get those same responses over and over again. You can pretty much almost start copy and pasting, or just with slight modifications, responding very easily and without a lot of thought to everything that's going to happen, which is why you're able to deal with this massive volume of girls and why you can get so many dates so quickly with this system. So understand the idea of invisible threads, and understand that, again, if you're using the same messages, you're only going to get the same replies over and over again. And again, in 3 Girls a Day, I'll go into exact examples of invisible threads and how to work this all out. But it's just something to be aware of for now, because it's going to help you massively. All right, to close this off, I want to tell you some of the most common mistakes guys make in texting. And here they are, just sort of like listed out for you. First mistake guys make in texting and online is what we call the immediate response, right? So say that the girl is spending 12 hours to respond to you, and then you respond in 30 seconds. Then she takes 10 hours and you respond in 30 seconds. Then she takes a day and you respond in 30 seconds. You look like you're sitting by the phone waiting for her text, and it makes you look very, very needy and a little bit like you have nothing else going on in your life. Now, I don't want to be so gamey that I'm trying to wait hours and hours to text a girl, but just be careful about continually texting back in under a minute, all right? You do want to convey that you have things going on in your life. If you've texted very quickly, sometimes just give it a little bit of a pause. A good metric is you want to be taking roughly the same amount of time to text back as she is. Now, obviously, if you're setting a date or you're on a deadline or something like that, that's different. But in general, if she's taking a long time to text back, you don't want to be immediate. It looks try hard. Next one is, I mentioned the 4 types of text: silence, shit test, logical question, and then overtly positive. The next issue guys have is trying to move things forward too rapidly. So they're getting silence, and out of silence, they try and make plans. Well, you shouldn't be making plans until you're getting overt positive. So be willing to have a few messages and go through the process instead of trying to jump to the end. Don't throw that Hail Mary pass. Just follow the process and make steady gains. Next issue I see a lot is guys never progressing the interaction. They're just afraid to take a risk. They'll converse and become text or online buddies with the girl, but they never actually go for plans. And the issue here is that, number one, I mentioned you missed that window of opportunity. Some other guy hooks up with her, and all of a sudden she has a boyfriend, and now you're out in the cold. But also understand, girls just won't escalate. Typically, most of the time, the guy has to do the escalating. And so if you don't, it just will never go anywhere, and you're wasting your time. Next one is what I mentioned before, which is the Hail Mary, right? Trying to go all the way from the first to the last. That's the extreme example of trying to move it too quickly. And then the last one is really interesting because it kind of contradicts the things I just said. So listen up, hold this in your mind at the same time. This is what I call lack of entitlement. And that's where the guy, you understand the rules of texting. You understand that you shouldn't text back too quickly, and you understand that you shouldn't overcommit when they're giving you silence. You should kind of backtrack in that. But sometimes, as a man, you need to kind of stand up for yourself and say, look, I'm a worthy guy. I deserve a response. Look, treat me like a human being. Look, what you're doing is unacceptable and rude. Now, if you say them in these sort of butthurt ways, it won't work. But if you convey that there is a certain way that you expect to be treated through your actions, it will go a long way. So a great example of that is, say you're texting with a girl, it's going really well, and you've almost made plans. And you've agreed to go get together Tuesday evening, and then you text her something does 7 o'clock work for you? And that's maybe Tuesday morning. And it gets to be about 2, 3, 4 in the afternoon, and she hasn't texted back. Now, a lot of guys, they don't want to be needy, so they don't want to double text. They don't want to send these extra texts and look try hard. But think to yourself, if this was your friend or someone who expected a good response from, you'd probably text them something like WTF or ... question mark. You would be entitled enough to expect and even demand a response. So when you're with a girl that you barely know, you should have that same level of entitlement at the same time. So while you do want to follow these rules, you don't want to follow them to such an extent that you're worried about always being correct and you show no entitlement. All right, so that's the 4 types of texts. Hopefully now every single text you get, you can categorize into those 4, and with the rules I've given you, you should theoretically be able to never make texting errors again. Again, there's lots of examples of this if you want to get into the 3 Girls a Day program, but this should be a good framework for you to get started. Next video, we're going to talk about closing, how to get the number, how to get her out on a date, so stay tuned for that.